All right. Welcome, everybody, to Finance 445. And by everybody, I think we have two students in this class, two participants. And so it's going to be fairly light on the discussion boards by design, as this is considered a directed study course, which allows me to spend more time with each of you if you'd like the extra assistance. So anyway, we'll get started tonight. We'll talk about estate planning. We'll make sure and get you the information you need to know for this week's assignment and for the assessment, which is the main priority of these sessions. But my name is Dave Shipley. I'm a certified financial planner. I work as a financial advisor during the daytime for Zions Bank here in Utah, and help people with their investments and financial planning, and actually help them with their estate planning. So tonight's topic is very topical to the thing that I do for my living each and every day. I've taught through Steven Senegar for about 5 years as far as online classes are concerned, and I really enjoy the opportunity to discuss and participate in these classes about finance and about the kind of topics that I'm very passionate about because of my work. Hope all of you are excited for the course. We're going to come away with some good information from this course that you can use throughout the rest of your life if you're willing to participate and learn some things. The text is very good. I think it's very helpful. I'm going to give you some examples from this week's chapter, chapter 15 in the book, on areas that they give you some tips this week that I think are great. You may think of estate planning and think, first of all, that's something that older people do. Hopefully you'll come away from tonight understanding that this is something that is applicable to all of us, no matter where we are at in life, no matter what we have or don't have, or no matter what our family situation is. There's a place for elements of estate planning no matter what our situation is or circumstance is. So hopefully we'll at least understand that by the time we're done. All right, so this is Finance 445, and this week specifically is about estate planning. Now, we're going to take care of some things here at the beginning of class only because it's the first class for the course. This will be information that we will not cover the rest of the session, so we won't take any more time than a few minutes tonight to talk about these issues, but we want to talk about expectations and the expectations that I have for a course like this. So my expectations as far as the grading is concerned are going to follow the expectations that the school has for you. Work that's on time gets graded full credit. Work that's not on time does not get full credit. That's consistent with school policy. Anybody who comes into a class like this and is really seeking and desiring to get an A from a class like this is going to have every chance possible to accomplish that grade. I am not a professor who is trying to find opportunities not to give you an A. I've had those professors before throughout my different colleges that I've attended, and I don't appreciate that. I want somebody who's looking out for me and trying to give me the best grade that they can based on the efforts and energy that I put in to the course. And I'll try to do that with you all. I don't have a certain amount of A's or a certain amount of people that have to fail. It would be my preference if both of you would get an A from the class, but I also realize that there are some people who don't have any desire to get A's. They just want to make sure they pass the class. If that's your desire, just make sure and get your work in. The number one reason why people don't pass a class like this is just because they don't complete the work. If you complete everything, in all likelihood, you'll probably pass the class. I can't guarantee it, because if you did everything wrong and didn't follow any instructions and turn everything in late, there is a chance that you wouldn't still pass. But that is rare. Out of the 100 or so classes that I've taught in the past 5 years, I'd say that I've maybe seen 1 or 2 cases where somebody didn't pass a class, and that's probably thousands of different students over the 5-year period of time. And I've never, well, I can't say never, I've seen just a few examples of people who didn't pass when they've turned everything in. Okay, it's very hard to turn everything in and still not pass. So just get the work in if you're just looking to pass the class. If you're looking to ace the class, make sure that work is turned in on time and that you follow instructions very carefully so that you can get the best grade possible. All right, so those are the basic expectations, but let's go over each one of the things that you have to do. You have discussion boards each week, obviously, and the basic elements of the discussion board to get full credit should be consistent across all the courses that you've taken online. And those basic expectations are: we've got to have 3 posts completed by Saturday at midnight for full credit. For full credit, we've got to have 1 post that's a main post that's 2 to 3 paragraphs and has at least 1 reference, so it needs to be a more substantive post that involves some research. And then the 2 other posts can be responses to myself as the professor or to classmates. In this particular class, most of what you do as far as responses are going to be in response to me, because there aren't a lot of other students or participants for you to respond to. So I do count those. Those are just fine. But make sure you've got that main post, that more substantive post. We'll need those for this particular course with just a few participants. And then make sure that you've got a main post in by Wednesday at midnight. That's an element of getting full credit. And make sure that you have at least 2 different days of participation. So if all 3 of your posts come on one day, I have to discount your score slightly for not participating at least 2 different days on the board. Okay, so those are all the basic expectations, should be consistent with other classes that you've had, but if you'll meet all those expectations, I can give you an A on the discussion board each week. If you miss some of them or turn things in late or submit posts after they're due, then I have to discount some, but I can still give you most of the credit as long as you're willing to participate with us on the discussion board. One of the easiest ways, in addition to discussion boards, obviously, to get points in a class like this are checkpoints. And checkpoints weren't always around, but they are one of the best ways to get extra credit in a class like this. You can get a half a letter grade worth of extra credit by making sure to complete all the checkpoints. So I think checkpoints are critical to giving yourself the cushion to maybe struggle on one of the tests and still get an A in the class. Because we all have an assignment or a test that we struggle with a little bit. Checkpoints give us that leverage or that latitude to struggle with one of the things and still do okay because of the amount of extra credit that can be possible if we complete all the checkpoints. So just find a time every day, morning or night, some time that's consistent, lunch hour, whatever it is, and make sure that we get those checkpoints in so that we can get those extra points and make sure and have them as a buffer just in case we need them. So checkpoints and discussion boards, I feel like easily the 2 most simple things that we do in a class like this to get points, but the bulk of the points actually come from, so more than 1/3 of the points in a class like this come from assignments. So we'll have 3 assignments worth 120 points each. Just be very careful to follow the actual instructions, fulfill the page requirement. So if it says 3 to 5 pages, that's at least 3 pages to get full credit. And the normal formatting, APA formatting, so double space, 12-point font, times Roman numeral, times Roman as far as the font, and then a title page and a reference page, although required, don't count towards your 3-page requirement. So just keep the basic writing requirement in mind so that we can give you full credit for the assignments that are due. Now, if you have a case study like you do this week with kind of 4 different scenarios that you're supposed to talk about, still write the paper in essay format. So just take each one of them at a time, make them a subject header, each one of the subjects, all 4 of the questions, and then write, including research from the text, about, in response to those different questions. And you should be in great shape. If you have any problems this week on the assignment, let me know, but it's pretty straightforward. And like I say, over 1/3 of your grade comes from those 3 assignments in week 1 through 3. I do allow for people to resubmit assignments for additional credit if you're willing to make the effort. But as far as getting full credit, getting 100% on the assignment's got to be turned in on time and instructions have to be followed. I do accept late work. I just can't give full credit for late work. Okay? So those are assignments. As far as assessments in this class, you are going to have tests each week. This week's test, for example, is 25 questions, multiple choice and true-false mix, but 25 questions worth 2 points each for 50 points, due Saturday at midnight once again. One of the main issues or one of the main objectives of these weekly sessions will be to prepare you all for the weekly test. The way that I choose to do that, and this could be highly effective for some people and maybe not so much for others, but the way that I choose to prepare for the assessment is to give you the topics that will be on the assessment, so you could take notes on each of the topics, and then as you're reading through the chapter that week, you can take special note for those different topics that I've told you are going to be on the assessment, and maybe take a couple notes or find out a little bit more information on those topics before you get to the test. This week's test has 60 minutes, so you've got to be going at a pretty good clip. You might run out of time if you're trying to research and trying to remember the information for each and every question on 25 questions. So I'd encourage you to take some notes, like I say, from tonight, maybe make an outline of what different things I told you would be on the test, and we'll always do that at the end of each session for the last 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on how long the test is. That's how much time we'll take. But when I go through those, I just encourage you to jot down, a note as far as the topic that's going to be there so you can prepare prior to the test. It'll make the test go much easier if you've done a little bit of preparation prior to. So that is the test. I don't allow test retakes, so please, please, please Give yourself plenty of time, be in a quiet place where you won't be interrupted, so that once you start the test, we're not going to have to be in a situation where you weren't able to get through it all, or you got interrupted, or something happened, or you started the test and then didn't finish it. Because I don't, as per course, and school policy, I'm not able to reset exams anymore like we used to, for people who made a mistake and started the exam when they shouldn't have. Just be very careful about that. Don't start an exam unless you're ready to complete the entire exam and have the time and have made the effort to be ready for it, so that we don't have to ask for a school exception, which is very difficult to get now, to have you be able to retake or take it again, which is very uncommon and rare, and takes visiting with the school about that exception. Okay? All right. One last thing just to wrap up, expectations and what's going on for the course. One of the things that is always, I guess, a temptation when you're taking an online class is to plagiarize. And I don't mean full plagiarism where you cut and paste an article from online, but perhaps, the more minor issue, which is still a major issue as far as the school is concerned, where you cut and paste just parts of information, or you don't do your own unique research, or you don't do your own unique writing. So I would just strongly encourage you to just do a little refresher on what plagiarism is. That involves a lot more than just stealing somebody else's work. It can involve just taking information from online sources and then not referencing it. Or it can be a situation where a whole discussion board comment is only a cut and paste job from something you found online. And you might reference it, okay? You've referenced it correctly, but that will not get you credit for a discussion board comment. Discussion is meant to be your feedback, your opinions, and then you integrate it in some research. And the same is true for the assignments. The primary objective of assignments and discussion boards in a class like this is for you to come up and form your own opinions and information and writing about surrounding the topics that we're discussing or doing an assignment on. Now, of course, you're going to do research, and of course, you're going to get ideas online, and those should be referenced. But the majority of your work should be your own unique writing. So if you get to the end of assignment or get to the end of a discussion board, and the majority of it is something that you've used from an online source, you need to seriously consider adding to that material, so that, like I say, the bulk of what ends up being written is your own unique material and your own unique thoughts and opinions, as opposed to just information you've regurgitated from something online. Okay? So that's part of the plagiarism conversation, is to get full credit for assignments and discussion boards. The bulk of your work, the bulk of whatever you do in this class, should be your own unique writing and not someone else's. Okay? Of course we research, of course we use online information, but we don't make that the bulk of our work. We make our opinions and our information, our unique writing, the bulk of it. Okay, that's plenty as far as that's concerned. Let's talk a little bit about estate planning tonight. We don't have as much time as we usually will have for our discussion this evening on the topic, but the topic comes from chapter 15 in the text, and chapter 15 is one of the last chapters, if not the last chapter, in the ebook that we're being provided for this course. And so what is, first of all, estate planning? You could define it a lot of different ways, but estate planning is basically planning or strategizing for the disposition of assets. Okay, planning or strategizing for the disposition of assets. So what does that mean? So disposition of assets would mean, if something were to happen to you, how do your assets get transferred to whomever next, right? Whomever you prefer to have them transferred to. So if you had a lack of estate planning, like if you hadn't done any estate planning, that would mean that government would decide who your assets were disposed to. And that's what probate is there for. Okay, and probate is the courts, is basically government through the courts dictating where your assets should go when there's a void of estate planning. Okay, when you haven't done estate planning and haven't prepared as far as your estate is concerned, then the government's going to decide where your things go. Now, before you decide that that's the worst thing in the world, probate law in most states is very orderly, and in fact ends up transferring assets to a spouse and to your children in a similar fashion to what you would have probably wanted anyway. The only problem with probate okay, even though it's going to your family still. It's not like the government takes your assets. But the only problem with probate is it takes a lot longer, okay, than an estate that has been planned for. And it's public information, so a lot of people don't want all their stuff to be public. And it costs money. So it takes longer, it's public, and it costs money. It costs quite a bit of money. It's a lot more expensive than if you had done the pre-planning before, okay? So probate is the orderly process in which government, using the courts, will dispose of your assets in a situation where there hasn't been estate planning done. Okay. So who needs it? Who needs estate planning? Well, estate planning is comprehensive, and I alluded to this early on in the conversation tonight that I would hopefully prove, okay, and the text, of course, goes down this road as well, but that I could hopefully prove to you all that no matter where you're at in life, no matter what station you're at, no matter what your circumstance, no matter what your family situation, estate planning is still relevant. And we're going to look at a slide in a little bit from the textbook that talks about how estate planning can be relevant no matter what your situation is. But the bottom line is estate planning is relevant to everyone at some level. Some people need very complex estate planning and need to involve, attorneys and teams of individuals, financial planners, CPAs to create an estate strategy because they've got a lot of complex issues. And then other people, if they had a written will that they had notarized, that they had written or typed up themselves using the format that their state suggests, through a company maybe like LegalZoom or, an online firm like that, that would be perfectly fine. So they've got some basic needs that they need to take care of, but not substantial issues. Okay. So how can it help people? And how can it help as far as assets are concerned? It can help as it pertains to people because it protects and preserves assets and transfers assets to the people that you care about most and the people that you intend for your assets to go to. I mentioned earlier that probate will usually give it to your family, which is probably what you intended, or next of kin is what they a lot of times will have to call it if you don't have a spouse or children. But just as an example, probate in most states, if you're legally married, 50% of your assets will go to your wife or spouse, and the other 50% will be divided among your children. Well, there are many circumstances where somebody that passes away does not want 50% of their assets to go to their children. They want everything to go to their spouse. Or let's say it's a second marriage and actually they don't want anything to go to their second marriage spouse because they've kept everything separate as far as their finances, and they want everything to go to their kids. So there are a lot of exceptions to what probate would do that would have a significant impact on where your money goes or where your assets go that probably wouldn't be consistent with what you want to have happen if you allow the courts to decide where things go. So some simple estate planning can protect the people that you love and the relationships that you have the way that you intend to protect and transfer wealth to those people. Okay, and it might be nothing, right? Or it might be everything, but it's your intentions get served as far as the people that are associated with your estate. The other thing that it can do is it can create legacies for charity. It can make sure that your children have guardianship. It can make sure that there's all kinds of elements to estate planning. It can make sure that you have people that have powers of attorney if you were to become incapacitated. That can be part of estate planning. It can make sure that you have a living will, which unlike a regular will, a living will has to do with your medical directives and making sure that you direct the hospital and the medical staff before you get there. Okay, so you pre-direct medical staff whether or not to shut off life support or maintain life support so that your family doesn't have to go through that decision, that painful decision on your behalf. Because most families feel like they just have to keep you alive if you haven't pre-decided, and if they don't, there's usually always somebody who's trying to fight that, right? If you've already pre-decided that if the doctor deems you dead without life support, that they should cut the cord in essence or unplug the machines to let you pass, then your family doesn't have to go through that excruciatingly hard decision of whether or not to keep you on financially. Sometimes it's a financial decision or turn off the machines. So anyway, living will is kind of a negative, it's kind of got a negative cloud around it, but still a very, very important piece of estate planning that all of us need to have. So no matter whether or not you could tell me that you have no assets and no children, no liabilities, and no reason to pre-plan for a funeral, anything like that, because you've already got, your mom's going to put you in a oak box that you've already made and float you down the river, and you're not going to have a funeral. I mean, that's all estate planning, though. So even if you think that you don't need to estate plan because you've got everything figured out, what you have figured out is your estate plan, right? In addition to that situation that I just mentioned, where you don't have family, you don't have children to estate plan for, you don't have to declare guardianship, you still would need your living will and power of attorney. And that's estate planning as well. So you'd still need to have your medical directives to medical staff if something were to happen to you, and also someone that can act with power of attorney to take care of your affairs if you were to become incapacitated before your passing. Okay, so there's lots of issues to take care of within estate planning. It's very broad. Doesn't just have to do with wealthy people trying to give their money to charity or trying to avoid taxes or trying to give it to their kids. It can mean that, but estate planning encompasses a lot more. And who can help you with estate planning? Obviously, attorneys primarily are the professionals that write estate plans. And how do they write estate plans? They create trusts, they write wills, they help fill out medical directives like living wills, they help fill out guardianship issues, powers of attorney. All these things are taken care of and written by attorneys. Now, most states would respect a basic will that was written by an individual without an attorney, as long as it's witnessed. Okay? So most states would respect that, but every state has different rules associated with that. Some states will even allow a verbal will to be considered valid. Okay, so if somebody has said their will verbally to someone else before they passed, some states will respect that. A lot of states will not. Okay, and a lot of states will not respect a written will that's not witnessed. Okay, so you have to be careful on those things. Make sure that you're following whatever the minimum requirement of your state is if you're not going to use an attorney. But I would strongly encourage you to use an attorney. I'm not an attorney myself, and I encourage my clients to use an attorney and pay an attorney so that they feel comfortable that they're using an expert and getting expert advice regarding these issues of estate planning. Now, myself as a financial planner and others as CPAs or accountants, other people as, they might be like a life coach, or, maybe it's somebody that works at a funeral home even that just has some expertise. Maybe it's your ecclesiastical, leader. Okay, so maybe a church leader, a pastor, a bishop, something like that. These people all might act as advisors regarding estate planning and estate planning issues, but in the end, it's only attorneys who have the legal right to draw up, a legal documentation on behalf of someone else and professionally do that. Okay. All right. So I mentioned that there are a couple things in the book that I think are very helpful. I don't know how big this will show up on your screen, but this is page 582, and it talks about excuses that people might have regarding doing a will. Okay, and we talked about this in terms of estate planning. There's really no valid excuse, but this goes over a lot of different issues. So, one of them is I'm too young, I don't need a will. My family knows how I want my assets distributed. I don't have enough assets to even worry about a will. My mom's going to take care of my kids, so I don't need a guardianship. Writing a will is too expensive. My assets are all with my spouse. They're joint owned, so I don't need a will. I don't have a kid, so why do I even need to worry about that? Because I'm not married. We talked about that one. All these are reasons why some estate planning isn't relevant, but all of them are not valid reasons to not have some estate planning in place. Okay, we talked about some basic estate planning, like medical directives, for example, that are relevant no matter what our situation is. And then things like burial and funeral preparations. That's something that, yes, your mom or dad could maybe take care of if you passed away prematurely, or one of your kids could take care of. But why would you want them to have to take care of that? Why don't you pre-plan, spend a little bit of time, and come up with how you want those things to happen, and also plan for them financially so you're not a burden on someone else. And a lot of people say, well, I don't care if I'm a burden, I'm gone. Uh, if you truly care about those people that would be doing that for you, I think it does. It makes sense to get your affairs in order and have pre-planned this information so you don't put that burden on someone else if you were to pass. All right, so here's some different estate planning problems. Another good slide from the book, one of the pages from the book. This one goes over different estate planning problems and ways that you can find out whether or not they are problems. So you can find out if an estate, and many estates do have this problem, where they're going to have excessive costs associated with transferring their assets to the next generation. The usual culprit is estate taxes, but estate taxes don't kick in for a married couple until we get to about $10.8 million worth of an estate. You might say, well, that's not very many people. Actually, with real estate and with business interests and with all people's assets and retirement plans and everything, it's more common than you'd think. So under $10.8 million, though, we don't have to worry about the estate tax, the 40% tax on everything above that threshold. So pre-planning for that's important. But more likely scenario is what we talked about earlier, which is probate. So those transfer costs become pretty extensive, both costs from actual money standpoint and a cost of time, if you allow your estate to go through probate instead of having beneficiaries listed and instead of having a will to dictate where things should go. But then you also have a lot of other issues. You might have a lack of liquidity. Let's say you pass away, you have a rental property, you want to split that between your children, you want to split the value of that, but you don't have any money. That could create a situation where your kids are forced to sell the rental property, even though it might be the greatest thing ever as far as rental properties are concerned, but they might be forced to sell it in order to create the liquidity to divide the assets between the kids. So there are ways through life insurance planning and other things that you can create liquidity upon your death so that your children don't have to sell a business or sell real estate or break up different investments that are very good investments just because you've passed away. And there are all kinds of other potential issues, but I think this is a good graphic to give you some ideas on different problems that could potentially be there and ways to think about those problems so that you can solve for them. Estate planning is taking different problems that could potentially arise from your passing and solving for those problems. And there's not really any problems financially that you can have that you couldn't solve for through good estate planning, whether it be taxes, whether it be issues of wanting to make sure to be very specific how your money gets transferred to your different children or grandchildren or charities. Those things can all be solved through good estate planning. Okay. This I thought was a good graphic because it talks through and bullet points through different issues to consider as it pertains to choosing a guardian for your children. And I realize not all of you probably have children. The two of you might both be single. But if you're a caretaker or a guardian for anyone, or if you potentially will be in the future, guardianship is important. And now we're dealing with situations where individuals have a grandparent or parent that they're caring for, and it would make sense to, within your estate planning, make sure that they're accounted for and that they will be taken care of. If you're the caretaker or primary caretaker for them, at this point, you might want to pre-plan for something if you were to pass. To take care of them. But there are other issues that you might not think about, like religious issues, political issues, moral issues, what their home environment is, what their family situation is, age of their children, age of the guardian. So if you declare your mother or father as guardian of your children if something were to happen to you, and then you don't do anything with your estate planning for 5 or 6 years and their health starts to decline because of the age that they're at, that's probably not a smart solution, right, to having your children long term if they're in bad health or if they're at an age where they won't be able to care for your children the way that you would want. So there's just a lot of different considerations I think are very helpful when it comes to issues of guardianship and trying to plan for that. And then this gives you some ideas on how to write a will. So It encourages you, of course, to use an attorney because the textbook and the authors of the textbook don't want to be held liable for people going and writing their own wills and making mistakes. But as I've mentioned earlier, that's a stopgap if you don't have any money to go, to go hire an attorney. Just writing something down and getting somebody to witness your signature on it, is a first step. Of course, you can hire an attorney at some point and do it officially down the road as you can financially. Okay. And then I thought this was a good graphic, another page from the book about why trust planning is a good idea. What does trust planning do for you? How can it be helpful? What can you do as far as the work that you can do through trust planning to reduce taxes, benefit charity, benefit your children or grandchildren in a unique way. Instead of just dividing out your assets, maybe you create what's called a legacy trust, where your children or grandchildren at certain ages or certain accomplishments are able to access funds from the trust. Famously, there's trusts for famous people that create, like the Kennedy Trust, for example, that actually pays anybody in the Kennedy family extra income, annual income, to compensate them for going into public education. So if one of the Kennedys decides to be a teacher, the trust is going to compensate them so that they make a decent, good living like other professionals would make, even though they're a teacher. So there's just some neat things you can do with the trust planning to motivate your children to do certain things, to go into public service, for example, or to start businesses, or to do work for charities, things like that. If those things are important to you, you're able to put language like that into your trust and you can create some kind of financial incentive for those things to happen, which is kind of exciting when you think about it. Instead of just giving them a lump sum, which statistically lump sums to a lot of people will ruin them financially. They'll get into a situation where they'll have the curse of the inheritance, or curse of the lottery winnings, or curse of gambling winning, whatever you want to call it, where they get a lot of money all at once. They blow it on a bunch of toys, a new house, a new car, those kinds of things. They end up with nothing, and then they don't have any money to maintain or pay taxes or pay maintenance fees on all those things they bought, and they end up losing it all. Kind of that MC Hammer curse, or you could go through stars and professional athletes all day long that have come into millions of dollars. They buy a bunch of fun things, and then as soon as they stop making income, they go bankrupt because they don't know how to manage a bunch of money all at once. Well, through a trust, you can help manage for them to accomplish a stream of income instead of a big chunk of change all at once. Or you can manage certain points where if they accomplish certain things that they can have access to some of the funds. So anyway, lots of creative things that you can do and do what we call legacy trust planning, as opposed to just a will where you just divide out all the assets equally. That's pretty common, but what's becoming more common for those who really are trying to be thoughtful about their estates is to really come up with a game plan as far as what their objectives are with the funds, and then what they want their kids and grandkids to do with those as well. It's their money, right? So they're starting to be more creative on how they're gonna gift it. Now, the other extreme example is people like Bill and Melinda Gates, people like Warren Buffett, some of the richest people in the world, billions and billions of dollars, who have pledged to give most of their assets to charity. So when they die, most of their assets are going to go to charity. Now, their choice when they have that much money is they either give it to charity or they give 60% of it to their kids and 40% of it to the federal government. Most of them feel like 100% to charity is a better option than that 60-40 split that I just mentioned. And so before we think that they're just incredible people, some of them are doing that for self-interest reasons. They already are going to give their kids a lot of money in life and in death, right? Their kids are well taken care of. And instead of just handing them billions and billions of dollars, they're going to be able to create all kinds of causes and different things, and some of which will be under their name, right? To create a legacy for their own name for the charitable planning that they did. So there's a lot of that goes on with the super wealthy that want to gift all their assets to charity. And by all, they mean most, because they'll still give significant gifts to their children And of course, their children have lived very privileged lives based on being part of their family in the first place, right? They're well taken care of, even independent of those charitable gifts that they're giving. All right, one of the things I wanted to do or make sure and cover tonight, and then once we do that, we'll get to the material for the test. I wanted to show you the week one readings and tools. There's learning objectives, right? And they list out some different information, and they give you some definitions on things. There's a couple pieces of information that are incorrect just because we every year the estate planning rules and laws have changed. One of the biggest rule changes that's happened in recent history is the fact that now you can take your full exclusion from paying estate taxes, which is under $10.8 million, and as a couple you can gift that in life and in death, but it's a combined amount. So as of 4 or 5 years ago, you would have a lifetime giving maximum, which was $1 million, and then you'd have a death in death maximum gift that you could give, which it had changed over the years, but it was anything from $2 million up to $10 million up to unlimited amounts. The estate tax went away for a few years back, but now the total gifting that you can do is in life and death. Meaning, if I give $5 million during my life, my wife and I, if we give $5 million away, we can only give $5 million in death, or anything above that's going to be at a 40% tax rate, pay estate taxes on it. Most people try to avoid that 40% tax. That means you're going to lose almost half your money to the federal government if you're over that threshold. And there are a lot of things that you can do from an estate planning standpoint to avoid that. Even if you have more money than $10 million, you can avoid that by giving to charity, by doing all kinds of other things, by giving your annual exclusion, which is $14,000 a year. But that lifetime maximum that you can give, both in life and in death, before you get into estate taxes, is $5.43 million per person. And so when you're married, it's $10.8 million that between you and your spouse you can gift in life and in death, okay? The total, but it's the aggregate between life and death. So if I give 10.8 during life, I don't have anything I can give at death. But anyway, that's the total I can give in life and death before I have to pay estate taxes at 40%. Okay, so the numbers in the book are behind. They're kind of outdated, and on this screen right here that I'm showing you. So there's a lot of different techniques that people will use to get out of paying estate taxes and to get out of having that liability of 40% to their assets. One of the ways they can do it is they can take $5.43 million and they can, like I say, divide it up between them and their spouse and have $10.8 million in power to give. But then also you have what's called an annual exclusion. And your annual exclusion gift this year is $14,000 per person. So if I'm married, I can give a gift to each one of my kids for $28,000 and I don't have to report it. And it doesn't count towards my lifetime life or death total of $5.43 million. So this is why you have a lot of trust fund babies, okay, or rich people that end up getting checks every Christmas time for $28,000 or $56,000 because maybe they and their wives both get gifts from both their parents, okay? So I, of course, have never gotten this opportunity, and most of us here, that are getting degrees and trying to fight for a degree through Stevens-Henniger probably are not getting this kind of money from, grandparents or parents. But it's important to note that exists, because if you were to start a business and have significant assets, one of the things that is important to do is to consider, if you're going to give this money in death, to your kids anyway, you might want to consider starting sooner, or earlier, and just making sure that you at least get this annual exclusion, $14,000 per person from each person. So $28,000 for a married couple that they can give to each other person without having to register it as a gift, and it doesn't count towards that 5.43. Okay. But technically, if I have a single son and I give him a $30,000 car, technically I would have to file a gift tax return on that money, and $16,000 of that would count towards my $5.43 million, and the other $14,000 would be my annual exclusion. Now, in practice, does everybody file those gift tax returns? No. But if they were audited, the government, the IRS, would force them to do that. so that they could record that some of that money, that total lifetime and in-death gift, had already been given. Okay? So then there are things like corporations and marital issues that you can work around when it comes to estate planning. A lot of people will form entities, in order to avoid estate issues and taxation. You can form family limited partnerships and all kinds of things to divert assets to your family before you pass away. And then the marital deduction just allows you to, between married spouses, to pass unlimited amounts of money between spouses when they die without any kind of estate taxes. So I just mentioned that you can't gift more than 10.8 between a couple, but they waive that when it comes to spouses. So whether or not, you're anybody who is legally married, right? And that includes more than just males and females now. Anybody who is legally married on the books has the ability to pass to a spouse any amount of money without any taxation. So Bill Gates could pass his $50 billion net worth to Melinda Gates when he passes, and there would be no taxation. But if Melinda tried to pass the $50 billion to her children, it would be taxed at a 40% rate, right? So they would end up paying like $20 billion in taxes to the federal government. However, that won't happen because, as I mentioned before, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is going to control the majority of their assets when they pass away and create a legacy trust basically for giving money away to charities. Because they did that, that gets them outside of having to pay estate taxes. So there's other ways that we can get out of estate issues as well. So one of the things that a lot of people think about is that, maybe in the future the estate tax might be lower, it might be higher. That's anybody's best guess because political leaders, even ones that you would consider, for example, some people would say, well, conservatives will probably get rid of the estate tax. And some people would say, and Democrats will make it worse, make it higher or tax more. But reality is, if you look back over the past 20 years, it hasn't been consistent with who politically was in office. It's just, is the federal government hurting for money, which they usually are, then a lot of times the estate tax gets pushed up or the limits get pushed down. One last thing I wanted to mention before we get to reviewing the test, and that is that life insurance can be a significant resource, a significant tool, a very efficient tool when it comes to estate planning. So a lot of life insurance individuals who sell cash value life insurance or whole life insurance really oversell the product. They sell it to young people, they sell it to people who are making good money just to make a commission, and they pitch all kinds of different reasons to buy life insurance. One of the legitimate reasons to buy life insurance is for estate planning purposes. And the way it can work is this: if you pay a very small premium on a relative basis each year, when you pass, the life insurance comes tax-free to your estate to pay for estate taxes. So if you're going to have a significant estate, but you still want to give all the money that you have to your children instead of to charity, that's fine. One of the things you should consider is to buy life insurance in order to pay the estate taxes when you pass. And you get what's called an irrevocable life insurance trust, so that life insurance flows into a trust that's not part of your estate and then can pay the estate taxes that are due so that your kids get all of the assets that you had instead of having to pay the federal government almost half of the amount. Okay? So that's how life insurance can help out. There's a lot of unique ways and tools and different ways of using life insurance to really help when it comes to estate planning and trust planning. All right. I mentioned earlier that we got 25 questions on the test. What I'm going to do is pause the screen. Okay, so hopefully, well, let's just do this. It probably will pause anyway when I move to a different screen. Yeah, it did. So it might just be a black screen now. What I want to do is just go over the test, and to do that, I need to look at the actual test. So we'll go ahead and end the slides part. But I'm going to go over the different topics that you need to know for the test. So for question 1, the topic that you need to know is from the book. As far as the book is concerned, what is the main objective of estate planning? So what is the main objective of estate planning as far as the book is concerned? Or what are the main objectives could be also right. So That's for number 1 on the test. Number 2 on the test, you want to know what the book has to say as far as what areas of financial planning are most similar, okay, or most closely related to estate planning. The book's going to talk about that. What are some of the main goals of estate planning? Number 3 asks you, what are some of the main goals of estate planning? You're going to want to know what the book has to say about that. Number 4 would be along those same lines. What are the main objectives or goals of estate planning? Number 5 and number 6 are going to test you on your knowledge of first level and second level death-related costs. So what does the book say about first level and second level death-related costs? You're going to want to know how often the book tells you to review your estate planning. So the book is going to have a suggestion as far as how many years between reviewing your estate plan you should go. Okay, so how often should you revisit your estate planning and make sure that everything's up to date? Of course, you know, with nothing changing, any kind of major life event, you could always update your estate planning. But if nothing's adjusting, then there's a certain time period that the book suggests that you at least review it. Okay. Make sure you understand what a probate estate is. Okay, so what does the book say about probate and what is a probate estate? We've alluded to that tonight, talked about it a little bit. Make sure you understand what types of life events would trigger more estate planning, and what types of life events, you know, because the test is going to ask you some different examples or ask you to demonstrate that you can identify different examples of things that if they change, you should make an adjustment to your estate planning, and then some things that you don't need to update your estate planning because of. We showed you that graphic on potential estate planning problems. You'll want to make sure and be able to recognize those and examples of estate planning problems. You want to make sure you understand what the book has to say about people planning means. So we talked about things versus people and the benefits of estate planning when it comes to people versus things. Make sure you understand what the book has to say about that topic. Once again, number 12 is about potential problems associated with estate issues. So you want to be able to identify those and what basically they are. Make sure you understand what custodial accounts are. They're a type of trust account. What are custodial accounts? Make sure you understand, once again, second level and first level death costs. Another question on that, number 14. Number 15 is a question that asks you, what are some of the reasons why an estate breaks up? So what does that even mean for an estate to break up? And why does that happen? We've talked about some of those reasons tonight, but you'll want to make sure you understand what an estate breakup is and what are some of the reasons why estate breakups happen. Make sure you understand some of the reasons for life insurance in estate planning. That's number 16. We talked about some of those reasons, but you want to make sure and read what the book has to say about that. Number 17 is another question about what a probate estate is. What is a probate estate? Make sure you understand how estate planning gets either complicated or simplified by having an estate that crosses different state lines. So I'll just tell you, there are different laws associated with estate planning in every single state. So it stands to reason, and you'll want to read about this a little bit in the book for purposes of the test, number 18 on the test. But the point is, if there are different laws in every state, the more states that you do business in when you pass away, the more complicated your estate's going to be, right? Because the laws of each one of those states are going to apply to your estate. If you just have one state, then you only have to worry about the laws of that one state. You want to make sure what the book has to say about making, knowing where important documents are and why that's important. Number 20, another one of these questions that asks about, so we've got a lot of questions that ask about problems, potential problems with estates and how estate planning can solve that. There are 20 and 21 on the test are both issues associated with estate problems and how they can be solved for. Number 22 on the test, again, life insurance question. Why life insurance in estate planning? What are some of the benefits, pros and cons of life insurance? Number 23 on the test asks you what trust principle is. What is trust principle? Number 24 on the test asks about the definition of a probate estate again. And number 25 on the test asks about the definition of a will, what a will is legally. Okay, so what is a will legally? We talked about living wills. Remember, living wills are more of a medical directive. A regular will has to do with your disposition of assets, like you would think of. Okay, so those are the 25 questions, or at least the 25 topics that you'll have on the test. So let's go back to the slides real quick. Okay, so you should be in good shape. I did want to show you, before we wrap things up tonight, the assignment. The assignment, I've put the page number on the instructions, so I did edit that tonight, so it does have a page number. You might want to go back if you've already, a lot of people will like screenshot, or cut and paste the instructions so that they have them early on in the week. Go back and check them if you did that, because I have updated them as of tonight. The assignment is to write a 3 to 5 page essay regarding the financial planning exercises on page 612. Now, note that on 613 there are more financial planning exercises, but I only want you to complete 1 through 4. Okay, so these 4 that are on the bottom of page 612. So as we mentioned earlier, you could take each one of these financial planning exercises. So number 1, like I say, and create a subject line for this number 1. Okay, and then write about it. And then do the same for number 2, number 3, and number 4. These might look like short answer questions, but as far as how we're going to format them for a 3-page essay or 3 to 5 page essay, we want it in essay form. And so you'll be answering the questions within the essay, but it won't be in short answer format. It'll be you're going to research it, you're going to find information from the chapter, and then you're going to write about the scenario that they're asking about and give your opinions and information. Just be aware in a class like this that you'll never be right or wrong based on your opinion. I'll never dock you for giving any kind of opinion, even if I disagree with it. However, on an assignment like this, I do expect you to read up on the chapter enough to have that perspective. Okay, so whether or not you agree or disagree with the information in the chapter, that's really not as important as just making sure that you at least understand the perspective from the chapter. Some people, write these papers, and it's very obvious that they haven't read any of the chapter. There's a reason that they're chapter ending questions. They are trying to get you to utilize the information from the chapter through these different exercises. So just keep that in mind before you do the assignment. I would strongly encourage you to read through the chapter so that you have that material too to help guide kind of what you end up saying about these different exercises. Okay, so that's the assignment this week. All right, since we don't have anybody participating, I'm going to wrap it up a little bit early, and we'll go ahead and circle around later this week. Go ahead and good luck on your assignment and assessment, but also your discussion board this week. We'll be able to see you on the board. Have a great week and a good night. We'll talk to you soon.